Welcome back. It's part 8 now of this build. I thought I'd do a very quick one now, just before I go gluing everything together, just so you can see how everything, all the lighting's been done. You can see here I've got the cockpit module in place. The figures are inside. The feeds come out of the back and they're fed along the top of the fuselage behind the passenger cabin module. I use a lot of this aluminium tape to sort of stick things down, just to hold things in position. It doesn't take up much space. It's quite sticky, so it keeps everything in position. You just got to be careful it doesn't touch anything that's a connection, because obviously it'll short out. And as I go along, I'm gradually sort of connecting things up, so eventually everything will just run off the one feed. As predicted, when this is lit, I mean, looking at it from the other side here, the module's in there behind the windows. You can see the reflection on the windows there that I've put acetate in. In fact, I've got the other half here. So you can see that in place there. It's just a piece of clear acetate. I glued it in with some PVA, and then I've reinforced the joint at either end with some CA glue. And by the time everything's in together, it's not going anywhere. It can't move. So as I said in a previous video, the plan is to mask all this center section off now, and that'll be left till the rest of it's painted, and then that can come off. But as predicted, even when it's lit, you can barely see inside. So all the work I did with the seats and the end walls and the little screens at the end and everything, pretty much invisible, which I was sort of half expecting, really. Although if you look very closely, and there's no point me trying to show it on the camera because you won't see it, but if you look closely when it is lit, you can actually see inside the cabin, and you can see the stewardess and Floyd sat in the seat fairly clearly. So you know, I mean, it is what it is, really. It's just a bit of fun. So the cockpit does look better in terms of what we can do with that. I've just noticed, actually, looking at this, that somewhere along the line I've inadvertently decapitated one of the pilots. He's lost his head. I've no chance of finding that on the floor now. So luckily I do have some spare figures, so I'll paint another head up and glue it on. I'll just have to be careful before I put it together. I don't knock his head off again. So as I say, the cables here are all running down towards the end. The major thing I've worked on today is the wing, and you'll notice I've pre-painted these in matte black, these intakes, so the two halves go together. I'll then mask those off before the whole thing gets sprayed up, so that the overspray doesn't go inside the intakes. There's no detail or anything in them. They're just literally black, sort of like a what would you call it, like a ellipse shape. But the main thing here is that I've run a green and a red LED into the wingtip lights. Now, I was conscious I didn't want to use the clear sort of coloured. Well, I mean, most of the LEDs you get now, they look clear, but they light up red or blue or green or whatever. But they are super bright, and I wanted something that would light up but not be overpowering. I didn't really want to have to step them down using resistors and things like that. So I've actually used some real old school LEDs, you know, the old-fashioned sort of coloured LEDs, which back in the day, I mean, these were the only things available. Like, I remember for a long time you couldn't get blue LEDs. You could get red, green and yellow, and that was about it, really. So they're not super bright, but they just sort of pick out the light on the tip, which is what I was after. What I've actually had to do is I managed to bore, by assembling the wing and sort of clamping it together, I managed to bore a 3mm hole into the edge of the wing, and then I've sanded the lip that normally sits around the back of the LED. I've sanded that off completely, so that is basically just a cylinder of plastic at 3mm, and then I've managed to glue it in place. You do have to be careful when you're sanding LEDs, because if you sand through the plastic and you sort of reveal the element inside, it won't work. So you do have to make sure that you don't go right through to the anode or the cathode inside. So they're done. I had to use the very thin wiring off the SMDs to wire through the wing, because there wasn't much space inside the wing when the two wing halves go together. And obviously I've taped that down. They meet at a point here, and it's only at this point where I attach the resistor. There's a common resistor that feeds these two LEDs, because there wasn't room to put the resistor inside the wing. So the resistor's here somewhere underneath all this tape, and then it's fed round. And the other thing that I've done is these tiny, you'll see them when they're lit in a minute, there's these tiny little lamps here that go on the wing root. I've used fibre optic for those, and I've run the fibre optic. I've had to epoxy it in place. You can't use CA glue on fibre optic because it melts it. So I've used clear epoxy and epoxied them in, and then I've run them into the center here, and they come down and meet a piece of aluminium tube in here, and inside the other end of that is a 3mm white LED, and then there's some shrink wrap put over the top, and the whole thing gets fed to the back here. So if I get a 9-volt battery, and I'll just connect that up briefly, and you'll see there's the green light. It looks a bit white on the camera, but it is that. There's the red lit. If I can get it sort of edge on there, you can see it's not over bright, although it does look a lot brighter on this. And then there's the white for the wing roots. Now those, they are quite bright, but they appear as sort of like just like one blob of light on the camera, but they are in fact two tiny little pinpoints of light. And then that's it off. So I do need to trim those up, but I'm going to wait until I've glued the top of the wing on, and I haven't done that yet simply because I wanted to show this off in the video. Obviously these feeds come into the back. Everything's going to meet up, including remember the tail section here with the lights in. So everything's going to meet up around this point here. There is another piece which is in there. There's like a kind of a central band that joins the tail to the fuselage. So somewhere in around that point, everything's going to be fed together into into just like a connector block, and then a single feed's going to come off, loop through this hole and down here, and there'll be a loop of wire running down, which eventually will be fed down the brass tube and into the base. So it's all pretty much good to go now, apart from the head of the pilot, which I'll have to sort out before I go fitting the rest of it together. I can get the fuselage halves together now. I can get the tops of the wings on this, and then this glued to the bottom of the fuselage, and I can get that central piece in, that connector ring, and then I've just got to wire everything up, feed it through there, and then glue the tail on. And once everything's together, it's good to start painting really. So I'm not very far off now. The only minor thing I've got left to do once the fuselage halves are together is there's the front cockpit window, which is in here somewhere, and there's also that there's a kind of triangular piece, this here, it's got some sort of rib detail on it that fits in front of the cockpit windows. It's kind of like, looks a bit like a sort of car bonnet, or a hood for those of you in America. So that's got to be glued in, and there's probably a little bit of filling to go in around that, because I've noticed a few builds I've seen online where there is a significant gap there. So that'll need a little bit of filler in, but I can do all that once everything's fixed together. So very close to actually getting this into one piece, and then I'm looking forward to actually painting the thing, because the most impressive thing about this is its size when it's finished. It is pretty big, and I think with the lights and everything it will really look the part. But you don't, it's a strange kit in the sense that because it's in so many parts, or separate parts I should say, you don't really get the true scale of it until you actually get to the point where it's almost finished. There we are. So it was really just a view of how the wiring's been done in here. I'll get all this together. The next video will definitely be a sort of preamble to the painting, you know, with just the sort of seams done and everything, and then there'll be probably one final video of the painting and the decals. So as ever, thanks for watching. Any questions, just let me know, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.